There were once two fathers in Robert Kiyosaki's life. One was highly educated, a man with a PhD, good grades, and a stable government job. He believed in hard work, job security, and climbing the ladder. He was Robert's real dad, and Robert would later call him the poor dad. The other was the father of Robert's childhood best friend, Mike. This man never finished high school, owned multiple businesses, and believed in building wealth by making money work for you. He was the rich dad. Robert learned early that both men cared for him deeply. Both offered guidance. Both were successful in different ways. But their views on money were polar opposites, and this contrast shaped Robert's thinking forever. He watched one father struggle financially despite his education, while the other, less formally educated, grew wealthier every year. This real-life comparison gave birth to the philosophies in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, a book that challenged everything people assumed about money. It all started when Robert was just 9 years old. He and Mike wanted to be rich. They saw classmates with better bikes, better toys, and more freedom. Their young minds associated money with happiness and respect, and they wanted a piece of it. Their first business idea? Melting down toothpaste tubes to extract the lead and form counterfeit nickels. Of course, that didn't work, but it did ignite something. Robert asked his biological father how to become rich, and the poor dad replied with the same script passed down through generations. Go to school, get good grades, get a secure job. But Robert wasn't satisfied. He looked around and saw people with secure jobs still struggling. That's when his dad said, "Why don't you talk to Mike's dad? He's good with money." Mike's father, the rich dad, didn't start by giving them money. He offered them a job, sweeping the floor at one of his convenience stores for 10 cents an hour. After a few weeks of doing the same boring task over and over, Robert got frustrated. He was ready to quit. So he approached Rich Dad and asked for a raise. That's when the lessons really began. Rich Dad sat him down and said, "Life doesn't teach you with words. It teaches you with action. Most people don't learn because they're too busy complaining." He explained that most people work for money. They chase promotions, bigger salaries, and better titles. But the rich, those who truly understand money, don't work for money. They make money work for them. That single idea reshaped Robert's understanding of wealth. Rich Dad told him that if he learned how money worked, he could master it. If not, he'd become a slave to it forever. And so began Robert's financial education, a lifelong commitment to thinking differently. One of the first concepts Rich Dad introduced was the difference between assets and liabilities. While the poor dad believed in buying a house, saving money, and avoiding debt, Rich Dad focused on accumulating assets, things that generated income. Robert learned that an asset is anything that puts money in your pocket. A liability is anything that takes money out. It was a simple definition, but it wasn't what schools taught. And it wasn't what most adults believed. Most people think their house is an asset, but if it costs you money every month, mortgage payments, taxes, repairs, it's a liability. True assets generate cash flow, rental properties, businesses, stocks, royalties. Rich Dad taught Robert to build a portfolio of these kinds of assets. Meanwhile, most people were caught in a cycle. They got a job, earned money, paid bills, and then upgraded their lifestyle. A bigger house, a newer car, fancier clothes. Each upgrade came with more debt, more expenses, more pressure. Rich Dad called it the rat race. It wasn't just about working hard, it was about being financially illiterate. Schools taught math, history, science, but they didn't teach how money works. They didn't teach how to invest, or how to manage debt, or how to build wealth. Poor Dad followed the system. He got degrees, became a teacher, climbed the ranks of academia, but he struggled financially for most of his life. Rich Dad didn't finish 8th grade, but he built a fortune by understanding how money flows. Rich Dad told Robert, "The poor and middle class work for money, the rich make money work for them." He explained that fear and desire control most people. Fear of being broke makes them work hard. Desire for nice things makes them spend more. The cycle repeats endlessly. But those who master their emotions, who educate themselves and think logically about money, break free. Robert learned to look for opportunities. He learned to ask questions like, "And how can I afford this?" instead of saying, "I can't afford this." That shift in thinking unlocked creativity. It encouraged problem solving, and it created pathways to wealth. As Robert grew older, he realized that working to learn was more valuable than working to earn. He took jobs to gain skills, not just income. He worked in sales to learn how to sell. He joined the Marines to develop discipline and leadership. He didn't care about job titles. He cared about growth. Rich Dad emphasized this often. If you want to be rich, don't specialize too early. Learn how to sell, how to market, how to lead. Understand accounting, understand investing, understand systems. Learn how money moves and you'll never fear losing it, because you'll always know how to make more. Rich Dad also taught Robert about taxes. He explained that the rich use corporations to protect themselves and their money. A corporation earns money, spends it on expenses, and gets taxed on what's left. An individual earns money, gets taxed first, and then lives on what's left. That's a massive difference. Most people don't understand it because no one teaches it, but the rich use it to their advantage every day. And here's the thing, none of this is illegal. The tax code rewards those who create jobs, invest in housing, and contribute to the economy. Rich Dad played the game the way it was designed to be played. Poor Dad didn't even know the rules. Robert began to see that wealth wasn't just about money. It was about mindset. It was about knowing how to think. While his poor dad said, "I can't afford that," his rich dad said, "How can I afford that?" One shut the door, the other opened it. One accepted limits, the other challenged them. That mindset changed Robert's life, and it would become the core philosophy behind Rich Dad, Poor Dad. As Robert continued his journey under Rich Dad's mentorship, he began to understand how deeply flawed traditional education was when it came to money. Rich Dad once told him, "The school system is designed to produce employees, not employers. It rewards obedience, not innovation." That hit Robert like a bolt of lightning. All around him, students were taught to memorize, to follow rules, to seek approval. But no one taught them how to think critically about finances. No one explained how credit worked, how to evaluate an investment, or how to build passive income. And so Robert became a student of the real world, of money, business, investing, and mindset. Rich Dad would constantly challenge him. "If I gave you $10,000 right now, what would you do with it?" And Robert wasn't allowed to say, "I don't know." He had to think, to plan, to imagine. He had to learn to make decisions under pressure. Over time, he stopped fearing mistakes. He saw failure not as something to avoid, but as something to learn from. Rich Dad would say, "Winners are not afraid of losing, but losers are. Failure is part of the process of success." While Poor Dad cautioned against risk, Rich Dad embraced it, when it was educated risk. That distinction was key. The rich aren't reckless, they're strategic. They gather information, seek advice, test ideas, but they act. Most people wait too long. They want certainty before they move. But in money and in life, certainty is a myth. Robert began investing at a young age. His first real investment was a small condo in Hawaii. He used what little money he had to make the down payment, rented it out for more than the monthly costs, and used the surplus to buy more. He didn't buy for appreciation, he bought for cash flow. That was another Rich Dad principle. Let your assets pay for your lifestyle. If you want a new car, don't use your savings. Buy an asset that generates enough income to cover the car payment. Over time, those assets will continue to pay you long after the car is gone. It's delayed gratification with long-term gain. Poor Dad taught Robert to be frugal, to clip coupons, to avoid debt, to save. Rich Dad taught him to be bold, to grow income, to use good debt as leverage, to invest. Poor Dad thought a secure job was the answer. Rich Dad believed true security came from financial independence. Robert learned that savers were losers in the long run, because inflation eats away at the value of money. He realized that the rich focus on acquiring income-producing assets, not on saving cash. Another turning point was understanding the power of self-education. Rich Dad read books, listened to tapes, attended seminars. He was always learning, not from schools, but from experience and mentors. He once told Robert, "Work to learn, not to earn, and never stop learning." Robert took that to heart. He immersed himself in real estate, business, marketing, sales, psychology, anything that helped him better understand the world of money. He also learned about the power of networks. Rich Dad said, "Your wealth is often determined by your network. Surround yourself with people who challenge you, who know more than you, who uplift you, Robert saw firsthand how Rich Dad spent time with bankers, lawyers, investors, people who spoke the language of money. Conversations at the table weren't about TV shows or politics. They were about deals, strategies, opportunities. That exposure rewired Robert's brain. It made wealth feel normal, possible, within reach. And it wasn't about luck. It was about preparation meeting opportunity. As Robert entered adulthood, he made a commitment. He would not live in the rat race. He would not work for a paycheck alone. He would build systems. He would acquire assets. He would teach others. That's how Rich Dad, Poor Dad came to be, not just as a book, but as a mission. Robert saw millions of people trapped in jobs they hated, living paycheck to paycheck, burdened by debt, afraid of risk. He wanted to shake them awake. The book's impact was enormous because it revealed the uncomfortable truth. Most people are financially illiterate, and it's costing them their freedom. The system isn't broken. It was never built to make you rich. It was built to make you compliant. Robert's goal was never to tell people to quit their jobs. It was to inspire them to think differently, to build side businesses, to invest wisely, to question everything they were taught. He emphasized the importance of taking control of your financial future, not relying on employers, the government, or hope. Hope is not a strategy. Education is. Action is. The biggest myth he tackled was that you need money to make money. Rich Dad proved that you need knowledge, creativity, and courage. There were countless examples of people who started with nothing and built empires. What they had in common was mindset. And while Poor Dad taught Robert that money was the root of all evil, Rich Dad countered, "The lack of money is the root of all evil." Money itself is neutral. It amplifies who you are. If you're kind, generous, and thoughtful, money will help you do more good. If you're greedy and selfish, it will amplify that too. But the tool itself is not evil. That shift in philosophy made Robert feel empowered. No longer afraid of money, he became a steward of it. He respected its power but refused to worship it. He learned how to multiply it, how to use it for freedom, not status. Rich Dad also taught the importance of giving back. "When you're blessed, bless others," he said. "The universe gives more to those who give." That was something Robert had seen in both his dads, but in different ways. Poor Dad gave his time and effort, often at the expense of his own well-being. Rich Dad gave through teaching, opportunities, and donations, while maintaining his wealth. Robert began to build his own businesses. He made mistakes, lost money, faced critics, but he always remembered Rich Dad's words. "Don't be afraid of losing. Be afraid of not trying." That mindset helped him navigate the ups and downs of entrepreneurship. Eventually, he reached financial freedom, not because he got lucky, but because he followed a different script. One that prioritized learning over earning, assets over liabilities, courage over comfort. And today, the message of Rich Dad, Poor Dad continues to echo around the world. It's a call to wake up, to question, to act. Because the difference between being rich and poor isn't just money, it's how you think. As Robert Kiyosaki's understanding of money deepened, he began to see the financial world as a game most people didn't even know they were playing. And like any game, there were rules. The problem was, the poor and middle class were playing by rules designed to keep them stuck. They worked hard, paid taxes, took on debt, saved what little they had left, and hoped it would be enough. But hope is not a strategy. Rich Dad taught Robert the golden rule of the rich: don't work for money, make money work for you. That simple principle turned Robert's world upside down. While his poor dad encouraged job security, Robert saw the danger in relying on one income stream. What if you lost your job? What if your health failed? What if the company downsized? The rich weren't immune to risks, but they had systems. They had investments that continued to produce income even if they stopped working. Real estate, businesses, stocks, royalties. These were the assets that created freedom. And freedom was the ultimate goal. Not a fancy car, not a big house. Freedom to live life on your terms, to spend time with family, to travel, to create. Robert realized that financial freedom was not about having millions in the bank. It was about having your passive income exceed your expenses. Once that happened, you were free. You weren't rich by society's flashy standards, but you were rich in time. rich in peace. And from there, wealth could grow exponentially. One of the most eye-opening lessons Rich Dad taught was the cash flow quadrant. It broke down the 4 types of people in the financial world: employees E, self-employed S, business owners B, and investors I. Most people lived in the E and S quadrants. They traded time for money. Their income stopped the moment they stopped working. But the rich lived in the B and I quadrants. They built systems and invested capital. Their money worked around the clock. The goal wasn't to work harder, it was to shift quadrants, to move from being an employee to a business owner, from being self-employed to becoming an investor. And that shift required more than money. It required mindset, education, grit. Robert started small. He took risks. He made mistakes. But every step moved him closer to the B and I side of the quadrant. That's where true wealth was created. Another major lesson was understanding taxes. Rich Dad emphasized that the rich don't evade taxes. They legally avoid them by playing within the rules. They structure businesses, invest in real estate, and use strategies that offer tax advantages. Poor Dad, like most people, paid the highest percentage of his income in taxes. He didn't know how the system worked, and so he suffered under it. Rich Dad's knowledge gave him leverage. It wasn't just what you earned, it was what you kept. Robert learned that owning a corporation, investing in real estate, and reinvesting profits could dramatically reduce your tax burden. It wasn't shady, it was smart. The wealthy didn't complain about the system, they studied it and used it. That was one of the biggest mindset shifts. Poor people think emotionally about money. The rich think strategically. While Poor Dad saw money as something you had to earn, Rich Dad saw it as something you could multiply. Robert was fascinated by how the wealthy viewed opportunity. They didn't see problems, they saw puzzles to solve. They didn't fear downturns, they prepared for them. In fact, many of the world's richest people built their fortunes during recessions. Why? Because they were liquid. They were ready. They had trained their minds to see what others missed. Robert recalled how Rich Dad would often buy distressed properties when the market was low, fix them up and rent or sell them when values returned. It wasn't luck, it was preparation. Poor Dad believed in job interviews. Rich Dad believed in deal-making. He taught Robert to negotiate, to spot undervalued assets, to think like a producer, not a consumer. That shift changed everything. While most people looked at a new gadget and asked, "How much does it cost?" Robert began asking, "How can I own the company that makes this?" That was a revolutionary idea, and it didn't require millions, it required mindset. Over time, Robert started teaching these principles to others. Not through lectures, but through stories, games, experiences. He created the cash flow board game to simulate real-life investing scenarios. It was designed to teach financial literacy in a fun, immersive way. And people began to wake up. They saw how their daily choices, buying liabilities, ignoring savings, avoiding investing, were keeping them trapped in the rat race. They realized that schools had failed them not out of malice, but out of ignorance. Teachers couldn't teach what they didn't know. That's why Robert dedicated his life to spreading financial education. He wanted to spark a revolution, to build a world where people weren't financially scared, where families had options, where kids grew up learning the real rules of money. Rich Dad, Poor Dad wasn't just a book, it was a movement. Its power lay in its simplicity. It didn't overwhelm readers with jargon. It told a story, a relatable one, a story of 2 fathers, 2 mindsets, 2 outcomes, and the choice was clear. You could follow the well-worn path of the Poor Dad, go to school, get a job, buy a house, retire on a pension if it lasted. Or you could take the Rich Dad path, build assets, grow cash flow, leverage your time, and gain freedom. Robert never claimed it was easy, but he showed it was possible. And the first step? Education. Self-education. Because no one is coming to save you. Not the government, not your boss, not your degree. The only one who can change your financial future is you. You must be willing to learn, to unlearn, and to act. Most people want change without discomfort, but growth is uncomfortable. It requires facing fears, making mistakes, falling and getting up again. But every step forward compounds, just like money. That's the hidden secret. Financial education compounds. The more you learn, the more you earn. Not immediately, but inevitably. Robert's journey was proof of that. From a confused kid in Hawaii to a global voice on wealth, he built his legacy not on luck, but on learning. He took two contrasting fathers, two worldviews, and chose his own path. And that's the message to every listener. You have a choice. Right now. You can stay stuck in old patterns, or you can start your own rich dad journey. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it. The journey doesn't end with financial knowledge, it begins there. Rich Dad always said, knowledge is only potential power. It becomes power only when it is applied. That single quote stayed with Robert for life. Because he realized that most people don't lack ideas, they lack action. They attend seminars, read books, watch videos, but they never move. They stay on the sidelines, paralyzed by fear, waiting for the perfect time that never comes. Rich Dad taught that mistakes are not something to fear. They're something to embrace. They're part of the learning curve. The rich don't avoid mistakes. They manage risk. They do their homework. They ask questions. They take small steps and build confidence. And over time, their assets grow, their income grows, and more importantly, their mindset evolves. That's the real wealth, the mindset. It's what lets you bounce back from setbacks, recognize opportunities, and build again, even if you lose it all. Poor Dad believed security came from a job. Rich Dad believed security came from knowledge and adaptability. Robert took this deeply to heart. He didn't just want money, he wanted understanding. And once he had that, he realized he could always rebuild. That's true power. Throughout the years, Robert began teaching more advanced lessons. How to evaluate investments, how to build a team, how to scale a business. But the foundation never changed. Build assets, increase cash flow, control expenses, minimize taxes, and reinvest wisely. He began to speak around the world, and the stories people told him were heartbreaking. People with multiple degrees but drowning in debt. Families working 2 jobs but still unable to make ends meet. Couples in their 50s with nothing saved for retirement. All because they had followed the poor dad path. They weren't lazy. They weren't stupid. They were just uninformed. No one had taught them how money worked. That's what lit the fire in Robert. He knew it was time to flip the script, to challenge the status quo. And that's what Rich Dad, Poor Dad did. It became a blueprint for those seeking a new path. Not just a how-to guide, but a mindset shift. It empowered people to ask new questions. What are my assets? What liabilities am I carrying? Is my job helping me build wealth or trapping me? How can I make my money work for me? What skills do I need to move to the B and I quadrants? And those questions led to action. Some started small, buying a rental property, launching a side hustle, studying tax strategies. Others took bigger leaps, quitting jobs to start businesses, investing in education, mentoring others. All of it mattered. Because every step, no matter how small, moved them closer to freedom. Robert always reminded people, it's not about becoming the next billionaire, it's about gaining control, having options, living life on your own terms. Imagine waking up and choosing how to spend your day, not because you're retired, but because your passive income covers your lifestyle. That's not a fantasy. That's the goal. And it starts with understanding the game of money. You don't have to be born rich. You don't need a finance degree. You just need the courage to learn and the discipline to act. That's what Rich Dad taught Robert, and that's what Robert now teaches the world. The most powerful asset you have is your mind. Train it well, and you'll be unstoppable. Let it go to waste, and you'll remain trapped. The difference between rich and poor isn't luck, it's literacy, financial literacy. And that's the mission of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. To open eyes, to spark change, to turn employees into entrepreneurs, spenders into investors, consumers into creators. The lessons are simple, but their impact is massive. Lesson 1. The rich don't work for money. They make money work for them. Lesson 2. Financial education is more valuable than job security. Lesson 3. Acquire assets, reduce liabilities. Lesson 4. Learn how to read financial statements. Lesson 5. The rich use corporations to protect and grow wealth. Lesson 6. The power of investing early and consistently. Lesson 7. The importance of mentorship and environment. Robert always said, if you want to fly with the eagles, stop hanging out with turkeys. Your peer group matters. Surround yourself with people who challenge you, who think bigger, who build. That alone can transform your future. As we close this journey through Rich Dad, Poor Dad, remember, it's not just a book, it's a wake-up call, a manifesto, a map to a new kind of freedom. Whether you're broke, in debt, or just starting out, it doesn't matter. What matters is your decision to begin. Start learning, start building, start questioning everything you were taught about money. The rat race is real, but so is escape. The path is there. Will it be hard? Yes. Will it be worth it? Absolutely. Because when you master your money, you master your life. You stop reacting. You start creating. And that's when true wealth begins. The kind of wealth that can't be stolen. The kind that gives you peace of mind, freedom of time, and the ability to make an impact. That's what Rich Dad wanted for Robert. That's what Robert wants for you. And now, it's your turn. Your Rich Dad story starts now.